Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To my brothers and sisters in Islam, and salam to everyone else. This is Ali. I'm going to be responding to actually two users, one by the name of Michael Payton and the other by the name of Got That Funk. Both individuals have been very civil in their discussion with me, and this has prompted a response in hopes that I might clarify some of my views. Unfortunately, I did not go into great detail in regards to what I meant by offensive speech or hate speech. Michael Payton states that hate speech is in fact protected under freedom of speech, and that the fact that I am offended makes no difference. Similarly, Got That Funk said something along the same lines, and that the right to offend was also part of free speech. Now, I just want to say this real quick. I don't mind the fact that people are criticizing my religion or criticizing, certain things about my religion. Nor do I do mind the fact that people try to be offensive, but I do consider that to be part of free speech. What I meant by offense and by hate speech, I think I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with. I do not think that hate speech is protected by freedom of speech, just like I don't think slander or libel is protected by freedom of speech. And I think we have a right as a community to boycott, which is a legal right. And we have the right to take it down. And what I mean by this is not so much forcing the person or the individuals to stop speaking, but to not provide them a forum. For instance, I don't have to sell hate literature in my particular business. As a community, we do not have to allow for certain groups to lobby at a particular area. We have every right to basically appeal to higher authorities to make sure that this doesn't happen. This is also part of our free speech. Now, what I find particularly interesting is that, for instance, if somebody were to draw a cartoon of a very derogatory cartoon about a Jew or Jews in general, or if somebody were to draw derogatory cartoons about blacks, or if somebody were to draw derogatory cartoons just in reference to really anything racist or any particular ideology that we seem to be very sensitive to. It's perfectly okay, at least in our minds, that we, if people were to lobby against it and it be taken down, it kind of skips our minds. We really don't think about it after that. It's just sort of a normal thing. We expect that to happen, and we don't complain. But when it comes to Islam and Muslims, it is not acceptable for the community to try to protest these sort of things or to get rid of them. And really, the reason I want to say this is because it seems to me the only type of hate speech that is still at least allowable in our community, that is not fought against in our community, in the West at least, is that directed towards Muslims. Now, I don't have any sort of, comprehensive, elaborate theory revolving around freedom of speech. However, I do have some observations in that the West is saturated with negative imagery and negative views on Muslims, and Muslims in general are very much the minority in the West, and their voices are not heard very well or very much. Now, to me, this causes a lot of problems, and I don't think hate speech is allowed or should be allowed under the freedom of speech principle, in so much that I do believe it causes harm to people, in that I do believe that it can lead to many horrible things for that particular group. For instance, going sort of towards the slander and libel laws, it's perfectly okay to say somebody is a bad lawyer. It's not perfectly okay to say that lawyer does not have a license, especially if they do have a license. we should have some sort of evidence for our claims before we make them, else that can hurt the individual quite a bit. There's some serious repercussions from these sort of things. Likewise, I think it's perfectly okay to criticize ideas, but for instance, whenever you create or whenever you are whenever you saturate the market with these basic ideas that generally lead to the view that the majority of Muslims are terrorists or are dangerous people, this can be extremely detrimental to the community. And we have already seen this occurring, especially in Europe, and it has grown in the United States as well. So, what I mean by hate speech is really anything that can lead to the harm of the people. Now, I'm personally not offended by cartoons. Okay, of course I'm going to be offended, if you insult the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that, but it doesn't really affect me that much. What affects me the most, I think, is sort of the cartoons like having the bomb on the Prophet Muhammad's head, because I think this sort of image, people tend to see it not as a criticism of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or a criticism of the religion, but a criticism of the people that follow it. And if I were to draw a cartoon of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, feeding poor people, or if I were to try to place my view of Islam in a newspaper, would it really be published? Would it really, be presented? I don't think so. I think the fact that much of the West is saturated with this sort of negative imagery and helps to support these sort of fanatical views of many individuals who have committed several hate crimes against the Muslim community at large, and have even helped to produce laws in Europe that have limited the practice, the innocent practice of many Muslim religious duties, and also the construction of minarets. I mean, this is absurd. When this sort of speech gets to the point where it is acceptable to believe that the community that you're speaking out against is in fact the way it is, this is sort of a form of universal slander. Okay, this is what I'm objecting to. This is why I'm offended. I'm not offended simply because you made fun of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No, that's not what I'm really offended about. I'll get over that. It's not a big deal. Okay, criticism against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in my religion happen all the time. All right, there are people out there that are more sensitive, and the fanatics especially, but not myself and most moderates. Especially regarding the South Park incident. Before that they displayed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there was no outrage. So that should tell you enough that moderates don't really, it doesn't really bother us. What I think bothers us the most is when those images are used so much that the criticism no longer goes towards the belief but towards the people. And I think if you really knew, I think if all of those people out there really knew what happens in the Muslim community, how the Muslim community is treated in general, how our rights are being taken away in certain parts of the world, and how it is clearly the media especially is clearly saturated with these negative images, and that do not allow for a balanced viewpoint, and that are not even predicated on any sort of evidence whatsoever, it is extremely detrimental. It's extremely detrimental. I do not think hate speech should be allowed. I think it's very bad for the community. I think it's especially very bad when we see the results of it, and we do nothing about it. We don't allow it for Jews. We don't allow it for blacks. We don't allow it for any other group out there. And, and we have a right as a community to protest it, to boycott it, and to take it down in the sense that we do not provide for it a forum. So I'm not trying to restrict speech in general, or I'm not trying to say that certain speech should not be done. I'm just saying that certain speech should not be given a forum. And if it is given a forum, there should be sort of a balanced approach, or at least some evidence to back certain facts up. Because there is certainly a difference between making a value judgment and then stating a matter of fact. To get the majority of people to certainly to believe that Muslims are terrorists or advocate terrorism, this is something that not only can provide, that not only can risk the lives of the people within that community, but can also help to create certain political decisions against it. And we're already seeing this. So, do I think there's a fine line? Yes. Between offending something and free speech, yes, I do believe there's a fine line. But do I think it's clearly evident that what this sort of speech is doing is hurting people? Yes, I do. So I think we need to start coming up with some boundaries, or at least some limits, because this isn't working. Salam.